and welcome to So Easy. Today we're going to have a look at the Darth Vader inspired apron. You might already have seen my R2-D2 one that's already completed, so if not, go back and check out that one too, because that one's really cool. This one today is Darth Vader, so great for the guys who are sometimes difficult to make things for or buy things for, but if you know someone who loves Star Wars, then they're probably going to love this Darth Vader apron. So let's get started and we'll have a look at the materials that we're going to need. So let's start by having a look at the materials that you'll need. First of all, you'll need some black or dark grey cotton twill. This will form the actual basis, the background for your apron. Then we need some colours. I've got a grey here. Ideally I'd have liked my grey to be a bit darker than this, but this is the only one I can get, but I think a darker grey would look good too. I've also got a little silver. This tends to come in the kind of novelty fabric section, so you only need a little bit. You can have a little bit of silver, but again, if you can't get silver, you can also substitute white or a very light grey. You need a little bit of white, some red, I've got a little bit of blue and also a green. Ideally, I think I'd have liked my green to be a bit darker too, but again, I don't have a lot of access to materials. I've also got a black quilting cotton. Now, mostly Darth Vader's costume, if you look at it in detail, is mostly greys and blacks, but if you put lots of black on black, you can't really see it. So do have a look around and see what other types of black fabrics that you can get. So obviously I've got the twill for the background of my apron. And then I come across these couple of novelty fabrics too. This one, if you look on the back, is like a series of little silver squares, which looks really cool. But also on the front of the fabric, it's different again. It's like little glitter hologram squares. So I'm not quite sure where I'm going to use it yet, but I really like this fabric because it gives me these two possibilities. So I think Darth Vader can never have enough glitter, so we'll see how that works out. This one also looks kind of leathery. It's a type of very thin vinyl, but actually it's just a fabric. And again, it's got two different sides. It's got a leather look on this side, and it's much more matte and dark on this side, but it's stretchy, as you can see. Now, we don't have to worry about that because we're going to add the Wonder Under or the applique adhesive to the back, and that's going to hold things stable. So I don't think we have to worry if you do pick up something that's got a little bit of stretch like this one. I think it'll still work, but we'll see. So those are the bits and pieces that I've got, and we'll see how it comes out. So print out your pattern if you haven't already, cut out your apron, and then we'll get started. Once you've got your pattern printed out and assembled, let's just have a look at some of the details for it. So around the outside of your apron you have a solid line. This is going to be the line that you'll use to cut out your pattern. So you'll follow that one to cut. That will also be the one that you'll use to then follow to cut the fabric. So you'll cut on the black line and then use the large piece to cut your apron. Then as we look on the inside, here's a dotted line. This is going to be our final seam allowance, and as you can see there's an inch of seam allowance allowed, and this is because we'll have a raw edge here and we're going to fold in our raw edge ½ inch and then fold in again and stitch, and then we'll end up with our apron on the finished dimensions according to this dotted line. And then we have all of the applique and detail pieces for the apron itself, and you'll see little letters. We've got SIL, which is for silver, BLK, which is for black, GY is grey, GR is green, WH is white, and you also have a little bit of blue and red, which are indicated accordingly. On this central panel, you have a large grey central panel running down through the apron, and it's also got these lines which run from top to bottom, and these are indicated stitching lines. Now, you don't have to be accurate and follow the lines I've written on here. They're really on the pattern just as an indication here of that this is a stitched area, and it just gives some detail and dimension to your fabric there. Of course, if you have like a grey pinstriped fabric, then that would be perfect. You can use that and, you know, follow the lines with some stitching, or don't bother stitching at all. So if we look at this central panel, for example, this is going to be our central grey panel running down the middle of the apron just here. So we'll add that, and then we have our stitching lines, and then we have the detailed applique pieces on the top, and these are all indicated here in the squares. So if we start with the cutting out of the main apron piece, and then we'll work on all of the detail a bit later on. So I've now got my apron cut out and it's time for us to deal with these raw edges. So we're just going to take it over to the ironing board, go all the way around and press in a 1/2 inch seam all the way. Once you've got it finished all the way around once and pressed, then you'll turn it again. Can't see obviously very easily on this dark fabric, but once you've turned it a second time, you'll get a nice neat edge, a 1/2 inch seam once it's finished, and give that again another good press. But don't sew just yet, because before we sew we need to create some straps. So do your pressing and then we'll do our straps next. Time now for us to make the ties for our apron. If you want, you don't need to make them at all, you can just buy them. Go and get some pieces of nice strong twill tape from your local store and sew those in and they'll just do just fine. I didn't find any in black, they only had it in a kind of a cream colour, so I've decided to make my own ties. So I've cut a piece of quilting cotton, just regular cotton, which is 4 inches wide, and same as we do for a bag handle, I've folded it in half and pressed it to make a fold down the centre, and then folded the raw edges into the middle and folded it in half again. And then if you take this over to the sewing machine and top stitch along both of these folded edges along the length. And then we only need to neaten one of the raw edges. So I've just folded over by about 1 inch and then just zigzagged backwards and forwards just here. And it gives a nice little neat pull kind of tab end on the end of our straps. So I've cut 2 which started off as width of fabric, so around 42 to 44 inches. And I finished those and then cut that in half, and those will be my neck ties. And then you'll also need some waist ties. The length on those, ideally you'll need to work that out for yourself depending on the waist measurement of the intended recipient. So cut yourself 2 waist ties and 2 neck ties, and we'll now add them into our apron. So my apron is pressed all the way around, as you can see up at the top just here. I pressed 1/2 inch and then pressed again, and I've done that all the way around the edge of the apron. Now you'll have to forgive me, obviously on the video and in any photographs the black fabrics aren't so easy to show up, but obviously by the nature of what we're making it has to be made in black, so I hope you'll be able to see it clear enough. So up here where I have folded, this is the top part of the apron, so I've got my first 1/2 inch fold just here, and now if I take my strap, I've got my finished end here, so I've just got the raw end just here. I'm going to place that here so that the raw edge at the end of the strap is level with the edge of the turn, and then as I turn the fabric over again for my second half turn, that gets caught in the seam allowance just here, so the strap continues to stay up here, but the raw edge of the strap and of the apron are both held inside that fold. So I can now fold that like that and put a pin or something in place just to hold that just there as I sew. Same over the other side. So if I can zoom in a little more so you can get a closer look. So here we are on this other top corner. I'm just going to fold up my fabric here, so I've got the raw edge, I've got the raw unfinished edge of the tie. I'm just going to fold that over so that the raw edges are all hidden down there on the inside. So that's how it goes up at the top here for our neck. Ideally we want to do it just inside from the points just here up on the apron. This one could probably actually be a little bit further over to the point, but as long as they're equal distance that's fine. Then we need to do the same at the waist. So here at the waist is the same procedure. I'm going to fold out the fabric, so I've got my raw edge, got the raw edge there of the tie, fold everything over so it's nice and neat, and then I can just put a pin to hold that in place as I sew. And now when I take this over to the sewing machine, I've got a really thick fabric, mine's are a little hard, then we'll sew around the edge, neatening these edges here so that we're sewing close to this inner fold all the way, and that's going to hold these in place. It's also going to hold the ties in place, and I suggest once you've gone all the way around the outside where you have the neck and the waist ties, you just come back to these points and also stitch over those again just to make sure that they're held nice and tightly in place. So my apron base is now completed, the straps are all on, the edges are all neatly sewn, and it's time for us now to start on the fun stuff. So let's bring our pattern over. So with our pattern, we've got a mixture of very small things and quite big things to add on to the front of our apron. And some of them appear to overlap each other. Now with the smaller pieces here, for example, you do want to put those on top of other pieces, but here up at the top, for example, you can decide whether you want this central panel here to be cut at this shape or whether you want to cut it straight across and overlap them. With mine, I've actually got an already very thick apron, and the grey that I'm going to use is very thick too, so I'm going to avoid overlapping mine as much as possible. So I'm just going to cut mine to the exact shapes and sizes, but if you want to overlap yours slightly, then of course you can, and adjust for that when you're drawing your patterns out. So the first piece I'm going to sew is this large grey panel in the centre here, and you can just sew that on if you like. You can sew the edges and then you can use these decorative lines to sew it, but I'm going to fuse mine as well because I've got a very heavyweight fabric. So let me bring over this piece using a piece of Wonder Under here. It comes on a big roll, so it's nice and economical for me to use this on the larger pieces. And I'll just mark off. Okay, so it needs to go down here. Oops. Like that, like that. I'm just going to mark off these outer shapes, and then I'll use my ruler to draw in the lines. Apart from up here where I've got the curve, I'm actually going to follow the curve because I don't want my pieces up at the top here to overlap. So I'm going to follow that curve round, meet the edge just here. Oh, there's the edge. I missed it. That was one of my design lines. And now I can join these with a ruler, just so that I am getting them nice and square. And the Wonder Under or any fusible web that you're using, obviously it comes with the glue on the one side and the paper backing on the other. So any markings that you want to do, we're going to be doing on the paper side. So that's my first shape traced out. We don't need to cut the pattern at all. Now I'm just going to roughly cut this out of the fusible web and fuse this now to a piece of my grey fabric, and then we can start piecing all of our pieces together. So I'm going to do this piece first on the grey. So here's my first piece now fused to the fabric, and I'm just going to follow along those lines to cut out the fabric exactly to the size and shape that I need. Now if you are using a fabric which has got a right side and a wrong side, then you'll want to apply your Wonder Under or your heat and bond to the wrong side of the fabric, because that'll be the piece of that'll be the side of the fabric that gets stuck to your apron, so that's going to be what's facing down. So always apply your glue to the wrong side of the fabric. Okay, so here's my first piece ready. Now I'm going to just continue on. I'm going to use all the pieces of fabric, some of the glittery ones, the black ones, and just match them up, decide where I want them to go here, and fuse all of my Wonder Under now to all of my pieces of fabric, so that I've got everything ready to place together on my apron in one go. So I'm starting now to assemble the main pieces. I've got the shoulder backing piece up at the top here, and then I've got my little pieces, the decorative pieces that go on top, then the central grey panel here, and then the start of my belt. So I just make sure that everything fits together as it should, and when you do come to fuse in place, you want to make sure that the panels down the centre are actually down the centre. So you'll measure from each side to make sure that you're centering everything as you go down, and I suggest starting at the top and working down, and then if it is a little bit too long with all of your applique pieces, you can just slip a little bit off the bottom of the grey one as you go. So now that I've got these ones lined up and I'm happy with these, I'll take this over to the ironing board, and of course they all have the backing paper on, so as I'm ready to fuse each one, I'll take the backing paper off and fuse them all in place one at a time with the iron. So I've got the main large central panels all now fused on, and I'm liking the way it looks. So now's time to decide about stitching. If you're using the Ultra Hold, you don't really need to stitch your applique on, but it depends on how well it's stuck. This grey fabric that I've got, for example, frays really badly around the edges, so even though it's fused well, I still think I'm going to go just around the edges here with a zigzag stitch or blanket stitch, just to make sure that everything's going to be good. And you can also use your stitching to define areas too. So where we've got the buckles and the little, well, I don't know what these are, little command things with buttons on, then you can do some accent stitching around the outside just to emphasize those. We also want to do some stitching through the center here. So if you get yourself some kind of erasable fabric marker, start somewhere in the center and draw yourself a few guidelines, and then if you do them, you know, remember that the template I've given you is just exactly that, it's a template. So if you want to change things up or alter things, then you do it exactly what's going to make you happy. So I think I'm going to make my stitch lines here about 1 inch apart. So if I just make a few little marks here to start me off, and then I'm going to draw some guidelines down through the center of my piece, and do some lines of stitching here and matching ones up at the top, a little bit of edge stitching, a little bit of just emphasizing some of the shapes, and then we can come back and start working on the actual detail and all the tiny little pieces that go with it. So that's how it's looking so far. Now I've added in my little bit of detail, just secured the edges of these larger grey pieces and added in the accents stitching just here. I've used a triple stretch stitch on mine. It's still a straight stitch, but it goes forward and backward and forward and backward and forward and backward, and creates a stitch with a little bit more emphasis than just a regular straight stitch. So experiment with your decorative stitches and see what looks best. Okay, now we're going to add on all the little bits and pieces. When it comes to cutting out the appliques for all these small pieces, I'd really recommend for that point use the Ultra Hold, because it doesn't require you to sew through, and some of these pieces, they're going to be so small you're going to be quite bored by the end if you've got to try and stitch around the edges of all of these. So go with the Ultra Hold, and then you can just glue it on and it's all done. So here where we've got I've got a silver or white here, all of these. So I'm just going to put all these close together when I mark them up. I don't need to leave any gaps. I mean, you can if you want to make it easy, just go around the pieces as they are on the sheet, or of course you can butt them up together. So as I've got one, I'll butt the next one right up to it and make the next, and put the next one right up to it and make the next, and then I can just fill in with my ruler all of those straight lines, and it just makes it a bit quicker and easier. It's up to you, whichever way you prefer to do it. Okay, so make a start on all of these small bits and pieces now. So you want to, if these are going to be silver or white, put all of those on the same sheet. So these also are silver and white. I'm going to put those on the same piece too, because then I can fuse the whole lot to my silver or white fabric all in one go. There we go, that's that done. And then the same over on the other side, just here and here where I've got little green bits, I'll put all those on one piece of the Ultra Bond, and so on until I've got all my little pieces cut out, and then we'll start assembling them again. So here's all my small detailed pieces now in place. I think the silver looks really cool. It's got his belt buckle just here. I messed up royally with the little bit of accent stitching. Unfortunately, this silver fabric is really slippy, and so even though I drew a guideline, I was not able to follow it. So these are a bit wonky. I'm sure you can do a better job than mine. Also got his little things on here on his command belt, or whatever it's called. So there we go, this is my Darth Vader apron now completed. I hope you've enjoyed following along with this. There is the R2-D2 apron. If you don't want to do as much work as this one, the R2-D2 is simpler, requires less colours, and you know, if you can't get these kind of specialty fabrics that look where you've got all the different blacks and things together, then go for the R2-D2 in a plain white and blue, and it's much easier to make. So thank you very much for following along with this tutorial. I've certainly enjoyed it, and I'm off now to fight good versus evil with my husband. He's going to be Darth Vader, I'm going to be R2-D2, and I'll see you hopefully over at So Easy again soon. Thanks for watching.